Welcome back. Interest in women's hockey has never been higher, and our next guest is sharing stories about one of the most successful teams in sports history. In her new book, The Role I Played, goaltender Sami Jo Small offers insights about her time on the Canadian national women's hockey team. She went to three Olympics from 1998 to 2006, where the team won gold twice and silver once. She joins us now. Welcome to the show, Sami Jo.
Thank you so much for having me on, guys. I really appreciate it.
Oh, yeah. This is such a great convo. Congrats on the book. And we want to dive in right away because, listen, we know a lot of big names from the teams that you've played on, like, Haley Wickenheiser, for example. But in your book, you actually go beyond those names. Why were you really interested in sharing stories beyond sort of the bold-faced names?
So I think a lot of people across this country know Haley Wickenheiser. They know Cassie Campbell. They know some of our big names. But in the decade that I was fortunate enough to play on the national team, there was so many inspiring women that I got to play alongside, that I got to call my friends. And I really wanted this book to showcase them. I wanted to showcase their strength, their resiliency, the challenges that it took to play on the national team at a time where really women's hockey, for most of them growing up, was unacceptable. So I wanted Canadians to know all of them, including Haley and Cassie in a different light, but also the people like Jennifer Bottrell, Delaney Collins, Sherry Piper, some other huge names that were so instrumental in making us so successful for so many years.
So you give readers a play-by-play account of what it was really like to be at those games, and in particular in the 2002 Olympics. You said that you remembered when you won, you remembered your family and friends, but also you really thought about your former teammates who you say you believe could have easily been in that spot. So take us back to that moment and why your mind went there.
You're so right that there was so many women and girls that could have taken our spots. And it just every year it changed depending on coaches. But we basically had a pool of about 40 women that went through all these challenges, all these sacrifices to be on the team, and only 20 got to play at the Olympic Games. And so that was often hard. Cuts could come at any time. It was often hard not to be angry at the people making the decisions. It was hard not to be angry at the people left in your friends' spots. And it was hard for us to kind of re-gel after all those moments happened. But we did. We had this belief in each other. And despite the hardships and everything that went on, all of those girls and women that weren't standing on the blue line with us, we were standing on their shoulders. We were a testament to the hard work that they had put in for generations before us. And so that's why my mind went there.
And you don't shy away from talking about your struggles in this book because you won gold at the Olympics, huge accomplishment, obviously. But then you also share your struggles and specifically disappointment when you weren't chosen as the starting goalie for the next games. In fact, you were chosen as the third goaltender and then therefore highly unlikely to see any ice time. As you were saying, a lot of people have dedicated blood, sweat, and tears to this sport. So why did you decide to share those struggles as well in the book?
I wanted it to be a real account of the historical facts, but also of my feelings at the time. And I think so many of us, not only in hockey and not only in sport, but go through situations that are just really hard, that are tough. And I wanted to acknowledge that. I wanted to bring the reader along the journey with me to show that it wasn't always easy. It wasn't always inspirational and motivational, but there was times that were difficult. And I wanted the reader to be there in those moments with me to perhaps help them think about their lives and how they might react to those situations.
So you grew up in Winnipeg in the 1980s playing on predominantly boys teams. So what was that experience like for you?
I love that photo. That's awesome. Growing up in Winnipeg, there was ice on pretty much every street corner. So I was very fortunate to get to play a lot of hockey growing up at a time where most of my peers, most of the girls I went to school with, were not allowed. And it was predominantly because their parents or their community centers didn't allow that. I was fortunate to have two incredibly supportive parents that were not really part of the hockey culture prior. And because of that, I think they saw no reason why their little girl couldn't play hockey if their little boy could play hockey. And so they encouraged me. They protected me from a lot of the negative comments that were swirling around me. Often it was other parents that would say things to them. And they allowed me to just have this joy that I had while I was on the ice. And they could see this big smile I had through my cage. And I think right then and there, they decided that they were going to support me no matter what. And just knowing that I had them in my corner made such a huge difference. I was always the only girl on my teams. In fact, my first real women's hockey team was the Olympic team. So not only did I have parents that were encouraging, but I ended up having a lot of really great teammates who, if one would have just been miserable to me, it might have made me quit. But they're all super encouraging and were proud to have a girl on their team and would often stand up to other teams if others said things to me or perhaps ran me or something like that. So I felt like I had these 20 brothers growing up, and it really was such a memorable experience at a time before there was the Olympics, before we dreamt of going and playing on the national team or playing internationally. I just found the joy in play. And I was so fortunate to be able to do that when most of my peers were not.
I wish we could say that a lot has changed from when you were a child. But unfortunately, when you talk about pay equity and women's versus men's sports, the disparity is about as wide as the earth itself. So the 2017 USA women's team, they actually threatened to boycott the World Championships because they were barely making a living wage. Some people may recall this story. Another example, NHL player Phil Kessel. We knew him when he was a Leaf, for example. He makes about $8 million a year, but his sister Amanda Kessel, she's one of the best female players in the National Women's Hockey League. She makes about $26,000 per year. What is it going to take to bridge this pay gap in sports?
You're so right. There is this huge gap, but I choose to look at how far we've come. So I think just the fact that we are playing this game, getting paid to play this game is pretty impressive. I think that we can now be professional hockey players while the pay is minimal. The national team athletes get paid by the federal government to be Olympians. And we can certainly have more, for sure. However, when I started as a little girl, this possibility was never even within the realm of my thought. I never knew that I was going to be a full-time hockey player. This was not something that I could have thought of. And so the fact that we not only have gone from it acceptable to girls now playing hockey to walking into a rink and seeing a little girl with a ponytail and not even thinking twice about it, it has become more a fabric of our society. So now I think the bigger question is our societal thoughts towards women in sport. And I think that that's really what has to change. And that has to change because there are so many people that love watching women's sport, and nobody's going to ever convince me that I'm going to be a NASCAR fan. No matter what you do and tell me, I'm probably not going to watch race car driving. And so what I tell people is we don't have to go after the non-women's hockey fan. There's millions and millions of people that tune in each and every Olympics to watch these women play. So many people know that the product is really great. So I think what has to change in order to get to that next step is really a solid business plan. It is no longer talking as if woe is me as a female athlete. It is now, what can I provide to you as a service, as a product? So I don't want to discredit what has happened for such a long time and how far we've come, but I also realize that we have further to go, and it's about having a solid business plan to get to that next level.
The Role I Played. Sami Jo Small, what a great convo with you. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it.
Again, her book entitled The Role I Played. It is available now. We'll be back after this.